a horn like a rhinoceros, right? We've talked about this before. So when a rhinoceros grows a form on its forehead, the form of a horn, it's this very hard flesh, and it's a cone, and that cone is shaped like this. So it's a little bit bigger where it protrudes out of the forehead, and then it stops maybe like that, right, as a tip. What's beneficial about a rhinoceros having a horn with a tip?
Can stab.
Yeah, so it's sharp, but think about it. I'll just draw a little rhinoceros right here. It's a horrible picture, but think about it. I don't know. All of the rhinoceros's weight and momentum is focused at one point. See, his body is huge. Where would I rather be hit by, his body or the tip of the horn when he's charging? I'd rather be, if he backed up with his, I'd rather get backed up than charged with the tip, because all his power is focused at the tip of this horn, all the weight and all the momentum. So we are going from a scattered state to a very concentrated, gathered, focused state, just like all the weight of this entire rhinoceros, all his cells and mass is focused here at the end of that tip. And when he strikes something, he's using all his weight and it's focused at a very, very small, sharp point. And that's why a rhinoceros is such a deadly creature, because he's so heavy, he's so big and powerful, and all of that power is focused now together. And that's part of this gathering and this power dynamic. The power increases after going through those phases, scattering and tribulation. Okay, and just back to the main point that we made is that part of the hot group in covenant with God is on the ground. They are waiting to be gathered, and they're sort of like victims, right? And then there's a portion of the hot group that's going to be doing exactly what we read that God is doing. So why doesn't God say, well, some of you will be doing what I'm doing? Why doesn't God come? Well, he does in different places, but why doesn't he come out and say that all the time?
Because then everybody would want to do it.
Yeah, it takes some faith to believe that we will operate as God instead of operating as in the position of men. Now, God doesn't love you less, or God doesn't have a plan for you less just because you're operating as a man at the very end of this age. If you still happen to be operating as a man and you're in covenant with God, you love God, that doesn't mean that God's going to forsake you. It just means that there's going to be another group of people who will be doing a slightly different function off of the surface of the earth. Let's see if I have that in my notes. I'm hoping that I did. Well, I think I did, but anyways, okay, well, scratch that. Okay, so let's move right along and talk about some gateways issues here. I wanted to talk about, hold on, bear with me for a second. Oh, the heart. Okay. Yeah. Let's go to Galatians chapter 5, verses 16 and 17. Let me get there as well. Go ahead and read that for us, David.
5, 16, and 17.
Yes, please.
But I say, walk by the Spirit, and you will not carry out the desire of the flesh. For the flesh sets its desire against the Spirit, and the Spirit against the flesh. For these are in opposition to one another, so that you may not do the things that you please.
Okay. So, read 5:18 for us as well.
But if you are led by the Spirit, you are not under the law.
And 19.
Now the deeds of the flesh are evident, which are immorality, impurity, sensuality. And 20 says idolatry, sorcery, enmities, strife, jealousy, outbursts of anger, disputes, dissension.
Okay, good. So yeah, I mean the list goes on and on. So in lap 1 we have a to-do list, right? All the things that we're supposed to do. We're supposed to go into Bible study, supposed to be reading our Bible, supposed to be praying, supposed to be going to church, supposed to be helping people, supposed to be evangelizing. I mean it's a long, exhaustive list, isn't it? The to-do list, the do list in lap 1. There's also a very long to-don't list. And this is an example of the to-don't list. So in lap 1, as somebody else puts it, people are sin conscious. They're focused on this to do my to-do list and to don't do my to-don't list, right? Now in lap 2, we take a completely different approach to the to-do list and the to-don't list. It's as if we're going to abandon both, right? If I try to abandon one, and if I try to abandon one and focus on the other, what happens if I just stay in lap 1 and I just focus on the to-do list? Does that take care of the to-don't list?
No.
It really doesn't. Okay, I may spend more time doing my to-do list, but if I were to stop doing my to-do list, guess what? I'd still want to do my to-don't list. They compete against each other. So that's the strategy in lap 1. And it works. It's servanthood. It's still a form of denying of self, where, okay, I have this to-don't list, and I would do it. Remember we talked about the demonic trading floors? I recommended that video on demonic trading floors. That's part of that very large to-don't list. So the strategy as a servant is to do so much of the to-do list that's going to keep me from doing the to-don't list. Well, in lap 2, we're going to move out of both of those as any type of focus. And as we move out of that, what we're going to now focus in on is our internal gateways. How does that relate to what I just said? So let's just draw the soul and the spirit in this diagram. Did I write gateways? I should have written Galatians. Okay, Galatians 5, 16, and 17. So I'm drawing a diagram here. It's just a couple lines, and they're touching each other. All right, so here's your spirit in blue, and your soul in green. So what's happening right now with most of the body of Christ, most of those in the hot group in covenant with God, is that our spirit and our soul are so tightly bound together we can't even distinguish the two things. They're both part of us, body, soul, and spirit, but we can't distinguish soul from spirit very well because they're so tightly bound. And that's what's talking about here in verse 17. Read verse 17.
For the flesh sets its desire against the spirit, and the spirit against the flesh. For these are in opposition to one another, so that you may not do the things that you please.
Okay. So this is a predicament that we find ourselves in, especially in lap 1. All right, so the soul and the spirit, they're so tightly bound, and they are contradicting each other, right? So instead of a force that would divide them apart, this force that's being applied just by our own natural sinful nature is pushing to keep them together, so to speak, soul and spirit. Even though your spirit's activated because you were born again, this contradiction, it says, and these are contrary the one to the other, so that you cannot do the things that you would. So I have difficulty doing my to-do list, let alone figuring out what really should be on my to-do list. Okay, so it's because the soul and the spirit are too tightly pressing together that the fact that they're in conflict with each other, you would think that they would want to divide and pull apart, right? That's logical, but that's not what's happening. All of that contradiction between the lusting between your flesh, that's just the toxic nature, the toxic relationship between your body and your soul, is at odds with your spirit. So instead of that being a force of division, it's actually a force of compression. It keeps us the soul and the spirit bound so tightly together that they're indistinguishable. So we want to be in a situation where we can distinguish the soul and the spirit. Remember we talked about how if I want to have a meaningful conversation with a New Yorker, right, and he gets up in my face and starts spitting and screaming at me as part of a normal culture, right, I would have to take my hands and push him away so that now there's a distance between us. So there's a distinction between us. If he's right up in my face, is there much of a distinction between us?
No.
I'm inhaling his spit. Right? So we're indistinguishable. It's just chaotic because he's too close to me and he's yelling too loud. That's like the flesh and the spirit together. So once I make some space for him to back off, then we can have a more normal conversation and we're free to communicate. Okay, the same issue with the soul and the spirit. The contradiction keeps them pressed together. And that's what this diagram shows right here. Okay, so pressed together. Together in conflict. Opposition, conflict. And this is all normal. If you're not going, there's no way you can't go through this. This is a normal part of the process. So what do we do in lap 2? In lap 2 now, we are going to use a gateway to establish distance between our soul and our spirit. And that is one of the purposes of the gateway. So let me read my notes, what I wrote. A degree of separation is needed between two different things that are hard-pressed against each other. The separation allows a degree of separation allows for the communication and is established through a gateway. So let's write this down. So in lap 2, a gateway is open, allowing separation. The greater the separation, the better the the intimate relationship, the better the relationship. The greater the separation, the better the relationship. If I'm acting obsessively and compulsively, it's almost like my spirit's like gum on my shoe. And where's that gum gonna go? Everywhere my soul decides to walk. right? And every time that's my soul walks somewhere, it just presses that gum more tightly to the bottom of my shoe, and it's annoying, okay? And that's what's going on. So when I create a gateway between my, when I recognize the gateway, and remember a gateway is always a connection between two separate things. That's a very broad definition, but my door is a gateway between my house and the outside. So anytime you have two different things, there should always be a gateway associated with a connection between the two separate things. So my front door is the connection between my house and my front yard or the outside, right? It's perfectly logical. Okay, so my soul and my spirit have gateways